Hey, this is Thunder the Desert Shaman. Well, I'm doing a video on So You Want to Be a Drummer because it is one of my passions and it's something I did in my life. So let me know on the feedback section, in the comments here, if you like this kind of direction I'm going in. I'm going to do a part 2 on that today, and I probably won't take as much time as I could. One of my earmarks is being a storyteller, and I could go on for probably days talking about the music business and talking about all the fun I had and all the little groups I was in. But what I'm going to try to do is pare it down and so that you can just get an overall drift of that, because I plan on doing other videos too on other passions in my life, like flying and the martial arts and other things. So this is just kind of a trial thing for me to get it together on that level and see how things work out. And I might jump back and forth in between my series videos just to do my regular thing about talking about certain things that might help you, or world events or whatever. Basically, I just want you to get comfortable with who I am, and I think the more you know about me, the more you'll know who I am. So basically, last time I left off where I was going back and forth between Vegas and San Diego, and I was making a transition from just playing mostly straight funk and rhythm and blues and getting back into my jazz roots, which if you listen to the first video, you'll see what that's all about. The exposure from my parents and so forth and so on. But during this time period, I was going back and forth, and I was learning as much as I could from guys that I figured, let's say guys that started off in jazz and they never deviated from it, and so they may have got slightly ahead of me, and so I had to play catch up there. But I was glad that I went off into the world of funk and rhythm and blues, because the whole music scene was going towards fusion, okay? And that would be fusing two different forms of music together, like jazz and funk. And so there you kind of got what Miles Davis was getting into on Bitches Brew with his fantastic band that he had, that he put together for that. Incidentally, I saw that band several times. I went up to this place, and here's another thing. I mentioned that I went to LA a lot from San Diego, and the reason that I did that too was to go up to there to these little clubs. The basic one being Shelly's Manhole. Shelly Mann was a drummer, and so he named his club Shelly's Manhole. And it was a little intimate place compared to today's standards. It was probably seated about maybe at the most 100 people, possibly 200 people. But it had a nice stage, and wherever you were in this club, you were close enough to be what I would call intimate with the performers on stage. So what I'm going to do right now is just go to the photo library, and I'm going to start posting some pictures and start explaining. I think a better way to do it would be to just give you a scattergun approach and then maybe try to fit all the pieces together for you after that. So here's a picture of me, and some of these pictures are really interesting for me. Here's a picture of me at a jam session in the early California days. I'm playing a set of Ludwig drums and happened to be at a fellow musician's house. You can't see the rest of the band, but this is a shot that was taken of me at that time. Like I said, there's going to be different time periods here when I was in California, and so, you know, I might have a different haircut or different whatever at that time, but you will get the drift. I will explain things to you as I go along here. So as I was going back and forth between San Diego and Las Vegas, some of the guys that were in Las Vegas decided to come to San Diego. And one of those guys was a really good friend of mine named Joe Murillo, and he was a very, very good sax player, jazz saxophonist, and he also played in the pit bands over in Vegas. Eventually, we formed a group together and played for probably the longest playing jazz gig ever in San Diego, in La Jolla, California, at a place called the Oceanus. And we brought top name guys into, and we would back them. And so here's a shot of that. This is me here playing the drums, and then this is the fantastic Blue Mitchell, recording artist extraordinaire. And you can see that the stage is really cluttered here, and then there's people in the background and sitting all around. This is really an intimate club. But with this, like I say, this was one of the longest jazz gigs in history in San Diego. I think it went for 6 months or more straight. 6 months straight. 5 nights a week, 5-6 nights a week. And everybody who was anybody made it to that place in La Jolla, including Jack Warner of Warner Brothers and just everybody, local TV personalities. I mean, everybody was in there, and this was the place to be. So this was a great, I'm glad I had this in my archives. Here's another shot at the same club, a little bit different angle, and better shot of Blue there playing trumpet. Again, Blue Mitchell, just a monstrous musician and entertainer. Here's another picture of Blue on his album Blue Soul, and it's a great shot of him. Has some really good artists on here: Jimmy Heath, Curtis Fuller, Philly Joe Jones, Wynton Kelly, some really great, phenomenal musicians. Just wanted to show a real good quick picture here of Joe Murillo, who I mentioned earlier. He was definitely a mentor of mine in the area of jazz. And this is Joe. Joe, rest in peace, brother. Miss you. Here's another guy we brought down from L.A., and this is the fabulous Joe Menza. And for those of you who are old enough to remember, Joe Menza was in the Tonight Show band on Johnny Carson. So he was pretty well known on TV, did a lot of solos and stuff on Johnny's show. And so we decided to bring him down. So let's keep in mind here that every time we bring one of these guys down to play, they're heavyweight players, number one, and they would never come down and be with a group that was amateur. So we felt pretty good at the fact that we could have these guys come in and we could back them and do them justice, just as their own group or their own trio or their own quartet would. Here's another guy that I really like, who is a world-renowned recording artist, and you've probably heard of him, Art Pepper. We brought Art down from L.A., and he came down. Unfortunately, there's no pictures that I have of us playing with him, and you'll have to take my word on this. Some nights I had people in there to take, it wasn't like, you know, today with the iPhones and everything, where you actually had to have a camera. So that's Art Pepper, and He also came down and played at the Oceanus in La Jolla on Prospect Boulevard with us. Here's another great artist, Mr. Louis Skaska, and I was in his band. He came down and sat in with our group. Of course, we paid these guys, every one of them, very well. He came in and sat in at that same little nightclub, and this is a later on picture of him, though. Actually, when he first came down, he had dark hair and all that stuff. This guy has been around the block. He's got over 50 albums out. He's been on numerous other albums. He used to play with Mongo Santa Maria. He played with Santana. He played with Joe Henderson. He did a lot of his own albums. He's actually the one that taught Santana how to play jazz, basically, or Latin jazz. He also did a stint with a group called Malo, and he also recorded with Janis Joplin. So this guy is definitely somebody that made a name for himself and made a mark, and so I'm honored to have backed him. But later on, I'm gonna show you some more things. This is the scattergun approach here. I'm gonna show you some more things in regards to him, because I met up with him later on in life when we were both about, he was about the age you see in this picture here, and he remembered me from the time that he came down and played at the Oceanus and wanted me to be his drummer, and not only be his drummer, but also form a big band for him, which I did. But I'll get into that later. Now I'm going to jump around to some different groups at different times after I moved to California. I put together a whole lot of groups, or either that or join groups, and every one of them was a group that made its mark, let's say, or made some kind of impression on the Southern California scene or the Las Vegas scene, or one of those two scenes. So I'm going to just start posting some pictures here. Here I am in a beach nightclub, and with bass player John Leftwich and piano player Mike Peed, P-E-E-D, who later, both these guys went on to make a name for themselves. I think John went to the Buddy Rich Big Band. Pretty sure he did. That's us down at the beach playing. So that was one group, and that was just a trio. There was no specific name for some of these groups. It was just the trio named after yours truly or whatever. So that's one man. I had a little weight on me there. Here's a group I formed when I was in California. I think this might have been around the 80s sometime. That's me on the right, and the other two, Mark and Alan, are on the left. And this was a band that we put together just for recording purposes, mainly for recording purposes only, to sharpen our chops up in that area and be able to take different tunes. And yes, we did some recording and we did release some tunes. One of the tunes was the famous Marvin Gaye tune, Heard It Through the Grapevine, only it was done in an instrumental fashion. So that's one band one of many that I put together. Here's another group that kind of emerged from the previous group that I just showed you there. Let me see if I can move this. This was a really good group. It was called Inside Moves, and it featured from left to right Roger Dashley, myself, and this is Rihanna, and this is George Gonzalez and Al Worthington. And the name of the group was Inside Moves. Got quite well known in San Diego, and we played every venue and every club and every party that we could. So we were pretty well known around San Diego with this group, Inside Moves. This is yours truly with the gangsta hat here. This is me playing congas at an outdoor festival in Ocean Beach, California. Don't remember exactly the details of that, but sometimes I switched back and forth between playing congas or just the regular drum set. I could do both. Moving right along here, now I'm going to expose you to some of the great musicians that I had the chance to work with in various groups or on various occasions, either recording or otherwise. And here's a great musician, Bob Magnuson. He did a stint with the Buddy Rich Big Band. He played with Sarah Vaughan, which I had the pleasure to meet her through him. He played with Jan Hammer, the guy that did the theme show for Miami Vice. He played with Art Pepper. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. So he's on all kinds of albums. So he was a close friend and somebody that I always, every chance I could, tried to work with. Here's another really good friend that I worked with. You might recognize him because he played with several groups, including Eric Clapton, Barry White, Phil Collins. In fact, he wrote a tune for Phil Collins called Easy Lover, which you've probably heard. So I used to work with this guy before he went off into the big time. Actually, I worked in a little small nightclub with him down on 4th and Market Street in San Diego, and man, I could tell you some stories about that place. It was black on black. There were no whites in that club. And it was a really groovy, cozy atmosphere. And, again, it was an intimate little bar. The Crossroads, it's infamous. And it was definitely in the part of town that you didn't want to be out in at night. Matter of fact, I had a few close calls working there, but this was a fond memory. And I worked with Nathan East many, many times. Here's another guy that I really liked, was a good friend of mine. In fact, he was the leader of the group at the Crossroads who actually had that bass player, Nathan East. This is Hollis Gentry, D. Hollis Gentry, and he was very well known in a lot of circles, had his own bands, played all over San Diego. He had a band called Kwanzaa, which really did quite well. He also worked with a group called Fatburger, which was headed up by none other than Carl Evans Jr. Now here's Hollis in a great picture. I love this picture because Hollis is no longer with us. He had a bad automobile crash and he hung on for years, but just didn't quite make it. So Hollis, my brother, you also rest in peace. That's one thing about the music business. You'll see a lot of people come and go. Not always the right way that they went. Here's another group that I put together called Ivory Coast. That was a really good group. Had some great players in it. This guitar player was used to play with Manhattan Transfer, if you've ever heard of that group. The rest were basically San Diego people, and this was a photo shoot that we did, and they told me, now, whatever you do, you got to make it to this photo shoot. Well, the night before, I just kind of had a little bit too much partying, and boy, was I hungover for this picture. I don't even know if you could see it, but maybe. The eyes are definitely vacant now. They're definitely staring off into eternity. As you could see. Yeah, we all had, I had on my Dakini or whatever they call it. We are all dressing Ivory Coast. African. Yeah, that was a cool band. toured all over the northern part of the United States, Seattle, places like that. Here's another great San Diego artist, Mikan Zlotnikovich, great piano player, played in the style of like McCoy Tyner, had several bands, played with all kinds of bands, has done all kinds of recording, and has his own albums too. I worked with this guy all over in La Jolla, at Pasquale's, and just numerous other places. He was also a good friend of Joe Murillo's, the sax player that I mentioned earlier. I hope he's doing well. I think he's doing good still in San Diego. Just another quick shot of Mikan Zlotnikovich on his album Come Together. Great shot of Mikan there. This is kind of funny because I'm the youngest guy in this picture. Here's Joe Murillo and Nick and Pat. And this is the owner of the club, Pasquale's, and here I am in the back. Starting to get some gray hairs there. Youngest guy in the band, though. This guy was 91 here, and Joe was 80, so... And Pat, I'm not quite sure, but here we are, performing every Friday night. Pasquale's, Prospect in La Jolla. Beautiful little Italian restaurant and bar and nightclub. So I enjoyed that gig. Here I am with the infamous Ronnie Laws, whose brother is Hubert Laws, which I'm sure if you don't know these people, these are all very high-paid jazz artists, okay, high, well-known. Now, Ronnie was with was a sax player with Earth, Wind, and Fire, and then he went from Earth, Wind, and Fire, and I think he went with the Jazz Crusaders for a while, and Jazz Crusaders were like family, they were related. And Ronnie then went off and did his own thing with his own albums, Pressure Sensitive and other albums. So I worked with Ronnie for a short while and got to meet other people in that Hollywood scene that surrounded him, like the Jazz Crusaders and Wilton Felder, people like that. So that was kind of a fun thing. This shot was taken on a balcony at the Catamaran Hotel in San Diego. Here's another band that was put together by this guy here on the left, who was owner of a music store, and then, no, this is him here, I'm sorry. And then this was Ray Vanoli, who was at one time a music teacher at one of my high schools, Mission Bay High School. So yeah, this is a shot of us taken out on the beach, if you can believe that. So that was a mostly a band for hire type thing, weddings and anniversaries and just private stuff mostly. Here I am on stage at the La Paloma Theater in Encinitas, California, performing with the Young Brothers, these guys right here, Twin, who have done many recordings, and that's Dave Millard on flute, and then way back here in the back, you can see a guy named Peter Sprague on guitar, who also went on to become quite well known. And there I am in my Pancho Sanchez get-up. Man, look at that beard. Playing congas for this particular, and percussion. So this was an interesting and fun gig. And I did quite a few things with the Young Brothers. Here's another shot of that same concert. Nice little concert, La Paloma Theater, kind of an old movie theater in a great little town in Encinitas between San Diego and LA. Here I am back here doing some timbali action, standing up on this one. this was quite a concert. This was a really good concert. Very memorable in my career. Again, there's Dave Millard playing sax, and I forget who this guy was on the guitar. One more shot of that scene, yours truly, and then in the background we got Peter Sprague on guitar. That's kind of a close-up. So now I'm just going to show you some quick shots of some of the instruments that I had. These are Toca Kungas. Kind of a blonde shell on those. Had those for quite some time and used them on a lot of different gigs. This is my drum setup here, like I had on the cover, the thumbnail of the first video in this series. So I had the snare, and then I had the hi-hat cymbals, and I had a crash ride cymbal and a ride cymbal, all Zelgin, by the way. And a splash cymbal, and then over here I had the cowbell for Latin tunes, rototom here, which you could adjust by twisting it around. You could adjust, you could tune it, put different tunes. So I had the smaller bass, the 18-inch bass, which is a jazz setup. But I found this setup worked anywhere, and I had mics for them if need be. And I could make them sound like a giant, the biggest drum set, Neil Peart or somebody like that. Here's a promo shot of yours truly in front of his Toca Kungas. So yeah, this was a pretty good shot, I felt. Here's a concert that the guy that I mentioned earlier, Louis Gasca, which is this guy here, if you remember that picture. This is when I put a band together and was exclusively his drummer and band leader for a while. A night of burning Latin jazz, recording artist, and Latin jazz trumpet impresario. And it tells who he was with here: Santana, Malo, Tito Puente, Mongo Santa Maria, Janis Joplin. Oh, he also played with the Grateful Dead. And this was by Victor's by the Bay, which was a nice little just restaurant, and I think there was a hotel there too. I'm not sure. I can't remember. But this was a really nice concert with Luis, my man Luis. So that's about it. Got really relaxed there talking about that stuff. It's always a trip going back in time and seeing yourself in pictures and seeing the things that you did. But I hope that kind of gives you an idea of my career as a drummer and some of the escapades I went on. And there's just so much more that I could do. I mean, there's a jillion stories, and there's stories about going to L.A. and meeting Miles Davis Band and going backstage and shooting the shit with his drummer. And oh, I mean, there's just meeting Tony Williams and hanging out with him out in back of Shelley's Manhole, and the guys that were in his group like Larry Young. And oh, I mean, you know, I could go on here for hours and hours and hours, but at least you get a general idea. And that's what this was all about, to give you a general idea of one of my passions, some of the things that I did in my life. And that was in the music, the realm of music. Now I'm going to do some other things too, because I got a lot more passions in my life. And I might want to mention at this point, you know, when you have a passion in life and when you have a goal and when you are motivated to do a certain thing, you can become very successful at that goal. Now, does success, I want to qualify this, does success always mean $1 million or $2 million in the bank? Not hardly. You can be very, very successful in your life with different passions and loves and things that you like to do, you can be very successful. But there's that old saying about the starving artist. Well, that would apply pretty much to my career in the music industry. Did I make money? Well, yeah. I mean, if you add it all up, I made quite a bit of money. But I'm talking about getting to the point where you are a national recording artist on your own right, and that you are making gazillions amount of monies, and you're living in some big house on the hill, like my friend Nathan East. How you doing, Nathan? But that doesn't mean anything more than what it is. You made a lot of money doing it, but there's a million artists out there that you've never even heard of that are 10 times better than the guys that are on album covers, okay? There's a whole bunch of musicians out there that usually rub shoulders with, came real close to making that kind of leap. Now, I must say I came real close in a lot of areas of making that leap. But see, here's the thing that you're going to have to realize as a young musician or somebody that's coming up in the world, is that timing is everything. Timing is everything. And I guess you could say that, about a lot of careers. Timing, the place, places, events, the luck of the draw, really, basically, is in your whole mental concept and your attitude and everything. So it's basically hit or miss as far as like whether you're going to get into that actual large figure income. But that's not why you do this stuff. See, I want to impress upon you this fact. I did music because I had a love for it since I was a kid. I did music because I was influenced by my parents. I did music because it was a passion of mine and I wanted to succeed. And I can safely say that I have succeeded in that arena. I can safely say that because not everybody that's a musician gets to hang out with the people and actually record with the people and back people on stage like I have, okay? And there are always the unsung heroes. Remember that. There's always the guys that if it wasn't for us kind of guys, there would be no music scene, because the music scene is made up of all kinds of people on all different rungs of the ladder. So if you're a young person and you want to play the drums, my suggestion to you is, or any age person, my suggestion to you is do it because it feels good. Do it because it has a draw that you feel, something that you want to do, something that you want to accomplish, some joy that you want to fulfill. And let me say another thing too, whatever endeavor you get into, like music for instance, to me that was a very spiritual thing. It was something that contributed greatly to my shamanistic tendencies, because see, when you play music that long and when you get to a high proficiency, which I was, then you get to the point where you're basically channeling the source, you're channeling the energy, you're channeling the divine emanation. And once you learn all the techniques that you need to learn, like the rudiments or the scales or all the different technical aspects of music, once you learn that, then you forget it. You forget it. In other words, when you're on stage, you don't sit there trying to do a rudiment or a scale or anything like that. What you do is you tap into the divine energy and let that take over your being, and so you have all the technical ability, but then the divine energy just comes down, jumps right into your body, and that's the thing that you feel at concerts when you get electrified, when you're sitting in an audience and you feel like you just get taken right out of your body. And see, that was the most important thing to me. I mean, even as a kid in that first bar that I told you I played in part one. And if you haven't seen this part one, go back and check it out. But when I was in that bar at 16 years old and I got the applause and the appreciation of the audience for playing a drum solo, that was a circular energy type of thing, okay? And so the audience feeds off the musician, and the musician feeds off the audience, and it becomes an even higher frequency, which I've talked about so much in my videos. And then it's soon after, there's a third part of it, which is the divine energy coming through you, and then the circular energy between you and the crowd just takes you right out of your body. And I'm sure you've been in concerts like that where you really didn't know what was happening. You were just so enthralled that you were in another zone. So I think I'll leave it there today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and like I say, I'm going to be doing other videos on. I hope I'm not boring you to death. And incidentally, if anybody has any ideas that they, my listeners and viewers out there have any ideas about what would you like to hear from me? What would you like to hear from me as far as videos go? Stuff that I've touched on, stuff that I have touched on in the past, or something that could branch off from what I've touched on in the past, or you got questions about it. I always like to get feedback in the comment section as to which direction you would like me to go and what you feel most comfortable with, and the shamanistic aspect and all that stuff. So if you got a chance, please do that. And if you want to support my channel, well, you can always go to spiritofcrazyhorse.com. It's in the show notes below. And there's a place to get my books, PDF or whatever, the Amazon hard copy, whatever you would like to get. And I'm going to do more on my book. I'm going to kind of give you a little bit more taste of what's in that. So until then, until the next video, I'll just leave it there. This is Roger Thunder. Adios.